Remember the first date you went on with Goldie?
Oh, very much so.
What happened? Must have went
Interesting
well.
you bring that up. Yeah. No, I was not. I wasn't thinking about anything other than we were going to. It was a World War II movie, Swing Shift, and I was a guy who played the trumpet, and I said, if we have to dance in this, you're a professional dancer, you know how to dance. I just need to figure something out. And
Everybody kept asking the same thing for decades. When were they finally going to get married? For 43 years, that question followed Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell everywhere. Reporters pushed it on red carpets, talk show hosts teased it with those little smirks, fans argued non-stop online, the tabloids recycled the same tired headline over and over like clockwork. Will they or won't they? Like not having a wedding ring meant something was missing, like the life Goldie and Kurt built together somehow didn't count. But almost nobody stopped to ask the real uncomfortable question, what if they already figured out something everybody else missed? Because here's the part the cameras never fully showed. These two had already seen marriage fall apart up close. They watched relationships crack slowly, then collapse all at once, the way real damage usually happens. They dealt with painful breakups, legal battles, awkward silence, and families caught in the middle. By the time they found each other, they already knew how ugly things could get when love turns into obligation. And that's when they made a choice Hollywood could never fully understand. They decided not to repeat the same cycle. Instead of forcing themselves into a traditional setup, they built something completely different, not weaker, not halfway committed, something calm, private, and honestly stronger than most celebrity marriages people praised at the time. While other famous couples crashed and burned in public, Goldie and Kurt kept standing strong year after year without needing papers or big public promises to prove anything. Goldie Hawn explained it in the most direct way possible. A lasting relationship isn't about marriage, it's about compatibility and communication. Simple as that. No fairy tale speech, no pretending, just
she said, well, we should go somewhere and maybe, dance to that kind of swing music. I said, I'll find that. And the Playboy Club was the only place that had that. So I went to the Playboy Club, and I just, immediately was having a great time with this girl,
Right.
Goldie. And we laughed, and we both agreed the night wasn't over yet. And there was no place to dance. There was no place to do this. We never got around to that.
Ending, just real experience talking. Kurt Russell kept it even more low-key, the way he always does. We hit it off and agreed, let's have fun until we don't. That was 43 years ago, 43 years without a contract, without a huge ceremony, without official vows in front of cameras and crowds. But somehow they still built a family, raised 4 children together, and stayed loyal to each other inside one of the most chaotic industries on the planet. And their daughter, Kate Hudson, sees it clearly every single day. She doesn't describe their relationship with some polished Hollywood answer. She talks about it like somebody who genuinely watched the love happen in real life. Kurt just adores my mum. I see him. He just loves her so much. That kind of thing is hard to fake for 43 years, so before this story keeps moving forward, think about the real mystery here. Why did people act like their relationship was somehow wrong? Who decided marriage was the only thing that made love real? To really understand why Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell chose this path, you have to look at the emotional baggage both of them carried before they ever became a couple. You have to rewind to 1983, before the headlines, before the public obsession, back to the set of Swing Shift, because neither of them walked into that movie looking for a fairy tale. They arrived carrying scars, disappointment, and the kind of emotional exhaustion that comes from learning the hard way what happens when relationships fall apart. Goldie Hawn stepped onto that set, already one of the most famous women in the world. Goldie Hawn wasn't just famous at that point, she was a full-blown Hollywood powerhouse. She had an Academy Award, hit movies everywhere, and a personality audiences couldn't get enough of. Studios built entire schedules around her films. That iconic laugh of hers had basically become part of pop culture itself. From the outside, her life looked perfect. Bright lights, huge success, non-stop attention. But behind closed doors, things were way more complicated. Her first marriage to dancer and director Gus Triconis started in 1969 and ended 7 years later. Goldie kept most of the details private, which honestly made people even more curious. But the ending still hit hard. Like so many breakups, it meant dividing a life in half, changing routines, changing names, and slowly trying to rebuild yourself after a relationship changes who you are. She was only 31 and already starting over again. Then came musician Bill Hudson. Their relationship brought 2 children into her life, Oliver and Kate Hudson. But when that marriage collapsed in 1982, the damage didn't stay between just the 2 adults involved. Situations like that ripple through entire families, especially children, and Goldie saw those effects happening right in front of her. Kids pick up on heartbreak faster than people realize. They carry confusion, tension, and emotional fallout long after the arguments stop. Goldie understood that deeply because she watched it unfold inside her own home. By the time she walked onto the swing shift set, she had already gone through 2 marriages and 2 painful divorces. At that point, she wasn't chasing fairy tales anymore. She had learned lessons the hard way, but she also wasn't bitter. That's important. Goldie stayed open-hearted, even after disappointment. What changed was her honesty with herself. Fame lets a lot of people pretend everything is fine. Real experience usually destroys that illusion fast. Later on, she broke it down with a series of blunt questions that caught a lot of attention because they sounded so real, not dramatic, not rehearsed, just honest. How many divorces are fun? How many divorces actually don't cost money? How many divorces make you hate the person more than you did before? How many divorces have hurt children? Every question already came with its own answer. And while Goldie was figuring all this out, Kurt Russell was arriving at the exact same emotional crossroads from his own side of life. Kurt had grown up inside Hollywood long before he fully understood what the business could do to people. He started acting as a child on Disney sets, following the path of his father, actor Bing Russell. For him, the entertainment industry wasn't some glamorous dream from far away. It was home. He saw the pressure, instability, and emotional cost early on. Before he even had the words to describe it, by the time he reached his 20s, he wasn't that kid actor anymore. He had become a serious leading man with real momentum behind his career.
But, and it sounds one of those stories that kind of sounds like, gee, that was fast, you know. Well, it was. You know, we just...
It happens
It happened
sometimes.
fast. And next thing we knew, she was renovating this house that Kate now owns.
Is that right?
Yeah, Kate, the house that Kate grew up in, she now owns. And anyway, we eventually found our way upstairs looking around at the imaginary furniture, and we're in the imaginary bedroom now.
Career, but success came with sacrifices, and he knew maintaining a normal personal life inside Hollywood wasn't easy at all. His marriage to actress Susan Hubley lasted from 1979 to 1983, 4 years, 1 son, Boston Russell. Then came another breakup, another divided household, another child adjusting to 2 separate worlds. After once having 1 family unit, Kurt knew exactly what that felt like. So, when he arrived on the swing shift set, he wasn't walking in with naive ideas about love or marriage either. Just like Goldie, he had already done the emotional math. He already understood what relationships could cost when things fall apart. Not in some abstract Hollywood movie way either. In real life, in family life, in the kind of permanent emotional changes that don't magically disappear once the headlines fade away. What neither Goldie Hawn nor Kurt Russell expected was what would happen once they were finally in the same room again. Their first meeting actually happened way back in 1966 on the set of the one and only genuine original family band. Goldie was 21 years old, Kurt was only 16. At the time, the age difference made the interaction feel small and forgettable. Just a quick introduction between 2 young actors living completely different lives. There was no romance, no sparks flying across the room, no dramatic Hollywood moment people could point back to later, just 2 people crossing paths for a second before life pulled them in separate directions. And then, 17 years passed. By the time they reunited on the set of Swing Shift in 1983, everything had changed. They were older, wiser, and carrying emotional scars from relationships that had already tested them hard. Neither of them was walking in looking for some perfect love story. That's probably why what happened next became so real. The strongest relationships sometimes start when people stop chasing them. There was no big master plan here. No strategy, no pressure, just 2 people who already knew exactly what they didn't want anymore. And somewhere in the middle of all that honesty, they recognized something in each other that felt calm, natural, and different from everything they had experienced before. Kurt later explained it in the most simple way possible. By then, both of us had been through divorces. We hit it off and agreed, let's have fun until we don't. That was the agreement. That sentence sounds casual at first, but it carried a much deeper meaning. There were no giant promises about forever, no pressure to perform the perfect couple role for the public, no contract pretending they could predict the future before actually living it. Instead, they chose honesty from day one, the kind of honesty that usually only comes after people have been hurt enough to stop pretending relationships are automatically guaranteed to last. And honestly, that made their bond stronger. Back in 1983, neither of them could have imagined how far this relationship would go. They had no clue that Until We Don't would turn into more than 4 decades together. No clue that the relationship people constantly questioned would quietly outlast countless celebrity marriages that looked perfect on magazine covers. And they definitely couldn't have known they were building one of Hollywood's longest-lasting love stories without ever following the traditional script everyone expected them to follow. That's the part people kept missing. The real story was never about whether they would finally get married someday. The real story was about what they were creating together behind the scenes while the world stayed obsessed with labels and ceremonies. Because before a relationship becomes legendary, it has to survive real life first. Before the admiration came the hard work. Before the headlines praising their longevity came private conversations, difficult choices, compromise, trust, and figuring out what kind of life they actually wanted to build together away from cameras and public pressure. And that question mattered more than any wedding rumor ever did. Not, will they get married, but what exactly are they building together? There comes a point in every long relationship when the foundation starts becoming visible. Not the polished public version people see on red carpets or in magazine photos with captions like "still going strong." Not the staged smiles, the real structure underneath, the habits, the loyalty, the respect, the private decisions nobody applauds because nobody even sees them. The real strength of a relationship usually comes from the quiet decisions nobody else sees, not the red carpet moments, not the interviews, not the big public declarations. The important stuff happens in private over and over again, when two people choose each other during normal, everyday life, long after the excitement and honeymoon phase fade away. That's where Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell built something different. Their relationship had a very specific structure, and honestly, a lot of outsiders didn't understand it at all. Even while living together, they kept certain spaces separate. Separate rooms, separate closets, separate places to recharge and breathe. To some people that sounded strange, but for them it worked perfectly. This wasn't about distance or emotional coldness, it was actually the opposite. They understood something many couples ignore. You can deeply love somebody without losing yourself completely in the process. Goldie especially believed in protecting individuality inside a relationship instead of blending into one identity where eventually neither person feels fully seen anymore. She explained it in the simplest possible way. I don't feel penned in. Just 3 words, but they revealed a whole mindset about love and commitment. Goldie wasn't describing detachment. She was describing freedom. The kind that allows affection to stay alive because both people still feel like they're choosing each other willingly instead of being trapped by expectations. She already knew what the opposite felt like. She had lived through relationships where things slowly stopped feeling natural and started feeling heavy, situations where love turned into obligation, where people assumed each other's presence instead of appreciating it, where routine quietly replaced attention and emotional connection. And she had no interest in repeating that cycle again. Kurt understood this too, not because of some trendy relationship advice or celebrity self-help philosophy, but because he had gone through heartbreak himself. He had already experienced a marriage ending, a family splitting apart, and all the emotional fallout that follows afterward. So when he and Goldie built their relationship, they did it intentionally. The freedom they gave each other wasn't a sign they cared less. It was actually the reason they lasted so long. And inside that foundation, they built a blended family that became one of the strongest parts of their story. By 1986, just 3 years after getting together, Goldie and Kurt welcomed their son, Wyatt Russell. What made it especially interesting to people was that they still hadn't gotten married. No wedding, no official ceremony, yet they were creating a life together that already looked more stable than many celebrity marriages around them. Their commitment came from daily choices, not legal pressure. Every day they stayed together because they genuinely wanted to, not because paperwork demanded it. That difference mattered to them in a huge way. And around Wyatt grew a family setup that could have easily fallen apart if the adults involved weren't fully committed emotionally. Oliver Hudson, Kate Hudson, Boston Russell, 4 children connected through different past relationships, all being raised together under one roof. That kind of blended family takes real effort to make work. It requires patience, communication, respect, and consistency. If even one part breaks down, the whole thing can become messy fast, but somehow Goldie and Kurt managed to create stability inside a situation that often becomes chaotic for many families. And the biggest proof comes from the children themselves. Now grown adults with families of their own, they still speak openly about the love and support they experienced growing up together. Kate Hudson especially has shared some of the clearest insight into what life inside that household actually felt like. And what stands out most is how honest everything seemed to be. Not performative, not fake for cameras, just Real people figuring life out together while genuinely caring about each other. What made Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell's relationship feel so real wasn't the polished Hollywood version people saw in magazines or award show interviews. It was the private version, the one their children witnessed quietly for years behind closed doors. Not staged moments, not PR answers, real life. Kate Hudson has talked about it in a way that carries way more weight than any romantic headline ever could. Because she didn't grow up watching a performance, she grew up watching their everyday connection. "Kurt just adores my mum," she said, "and I see him, he just loves her so much." There's something powerful about how simple that sounds. Kate wasn't trying to sell some fairy tale. She was speaking with the calm certainty of someone who had spent her entire life seeing the relationship up close, in ordinary moments no cameras ever captured. That kind of testimony hits differently because it feels lived in and genuine. For decades, Goldie and Kurt built a home around that love, a private world away from the chaos of Hollywood. But in 2020, that sense of safety was suddenly shattered in a terrifying way. During the middle of the pandemic, while the entire world already felt uncertain and tense, their Pacific Palisades home was broken into, and the details made the situation even more disturbing. The timing wasn't random. Goldie later explained that the intruders entered during a very specific gap in the couple's schedule, just 2 hours and 20 minutes while they were gone. Long enough to carry out the crime, short enough to make it feel calculated. It raised a frightening possibility. Somebody may have been watching the house carefully. The intruders reportedly entered through the bedroom balcony and moved through the home Goldie and Kurt had spent decades building together. Through hallways filled with memories, family photos, personal belongings, pieces of an entire shared life. Then they reached Goldie's closet. That space had a reinforced door meant to protect valuables and private items, but it didn't stop them. When Goldie came home and walked upstairs to see what had happened, the emotional impact hit instantly. And it wasn't just about stolen property. Something much deeper had been damaged. A home is supposed to feel safe. It's the one place where people drop the public image and just exist as themselves. For Goldie, that sense of peace suddenly disappeared the moment strangers invaded that space. She later described the moment with heartbreaking honesty. "I went up the stairs, and I walked into my closet, and I just lost it." You can feel the shock in those words, but the situation became even more unsettling only a few months later. About 4 months after the first break-in, Goldie was home alone when she suddenly heard a loud noise upstairs. At the time, she didn't fully understand what caused it, but the next day, she reportedly learned that someone had attempted to enter her bedroom while she was still inside the house. That detail changed everything. This wasn't just fear after the fact anymore. This was the terrifying realization that somebody may have tried to get into her private space while she was there alone and vulnerable. "I couldn't believe it," she later admitted. "What is happening here?"
And
That's amazing.
And we're realistically having sex when the police walked in because we had to break into the place to get in. So the next thing I know is a flashlight, and Goldie and I are both, what, you know. So,
Some people
yeah,
are into that. You know, I'm just.
Copus interrupt us, I guess. So it was bizarre and weird, but we were being told, I guess, to go get a hotel room, which we did.
And that question carried real fear behind it, because experiences like that don't just affect one night. They change how a person feels inside their own home afterward. Every quiet evening suddenly feels different. Every strange sound becomes suspicious. Spaces that once felt comforting start carrying anxiety instead. For Goldie, the emotional impact wasn't only physical or financial. It was psychological. The break-ins shook the feeling of security she and Kurt had spent years building together. And when something invades your peace that deeply, it can leave a mark long after the headlines disappear. After the break-ins, Goldie Hawn's sense of security changed completely. She stopped spending time alone without protection and admitted, "I'm never without a guard." That statement alone showed how deeply the experience affected her. The fear didn't just disappear once the police reports were finished or the headlines moved on. It stayed with her. And when she talked about Los Angeles, the city where she built her career and spent decades of her life, her frustration sounded painfully real. "LA is terrible." That wasn't just anger over one incident. It reflected something much bigger. The city that once represented excitement, opportunity, and success suddenly felt unsafe in a way she couldn't ignore anymore. So Goldie and Kurt started seriously thinking about leaving. Palm Desert became part of the conversation because it offered something their Pacific Palisades home no longer could: peace, privacy, distance from chaos, and hopefully a stronger sense of safety. But beneath all the stories about stolen valuables and celebrity security systems, something much more important was quietly revealed about their relationship. And honestly, it was the exact thing people had missed for over 40 years while obsessing about why they never got married. When the safety of their home was shaken, Goldie and Kurt didn't react like two separate people handling problems side by side. They reacted like a deeply connected unit. A real partnership built over decades through everyday life, trust, loyalty, and shared experience. At that point, their lives were completely intertwined, not because of paperwork, not because a ceremony legally connected them, but because 43 years of memories, struggles, parenting, routines, and emotional support had tied them together in a way no document ever could. Goldie's fear became Kurt's fear too. The conversations about where to live next, how to stay safe, what kind of future they wanted, all of those decisions happened together as one family. That kind of bond doesn't magically appear because of wedding vows. It comes from years of consistently choosing each other through every stage of life. That's what people overlooked. No marriage certificate created that level of commitment. No public ceremony guaranteed it. Goldie and Kurt built it quietly over time in ordinary moments nobody applauded or even noticed. Day after day, year after year. By that point, staying together wasn't some dramatic romantic gesture anymore. It had simply become the natural shape of their lives. And while intruders could break into a house, they couldn't break what Goldie and Kurt had spent decades building emotionally. That part stayed solid. There's also a different kind of clarity that comes with getting older, especially after surviving so much together. Not celebrity visibility. They already had that for years. Fame gives people recognition, headlines, cameras, and attention. But it doesn't always mean people truly understand who you are. What Goldie and Kurt reached later in life was something deeper. The kind of understanding that only comes after decades of living, failing, rebuilding, and surviving together long enough to finally see the full shape of your life clearly. By the time they reached their 70s, something important became impossible to ignore for anyone willing to look past the non-stop marriage questions. This was never a relationship that refused commitment. It was a relationship that completely redefined what commitment could actually look like. Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell's relationship wasn't built around one big romantic moment or a flashy ceremony. It was built around something much harder, the everyday work of staying connected to another person across decades of real life. Not just the exciting moments, the difficult ones too. The illnesses, the disappointments, the stress, the losses, the physical changes that come with aging and that fame or money can't magically erase. And maybe most importantly, the ordinary days nobody talks about, the random Tuesday nights at home, the quiet routines, the little conversations in the kitchen, the moments with no cameras, no headlines, and no audience. Because in the end, that's where relationships either survive or slowly fall apart. For Goldie and Kurt, it survived. Even in his 70s, Kurt Russell still carried himself with the calm focus of somebody who genuinely enjoys his craft instead of desperately chasing attention. His role in Taylor Sheridan's The Madison didn't feel like an aging actor trying to stay relevant. It felt like a veteran choosing projects carefully because he no longer had anything to prove. That confidence shows. Kurt works because the work still matters to him, not because he's trying to convince the world of anything. There's a huge difference between chasing fame and simply living with purpose. And people can see it when they watch him on screen. Goldie moved through life with that same sense of purpose, just in a different direction. At 79, she balanced public life and private life in a way very few celebrities ever manage. And one of the biggest examples of that came through the foundation she launched in 2003 called Mind Up. This wasn't some shallow celebrity's side project made for publicity. Goldie created Mind Up because she became deeply concerned about rising anxiety, stress, and depression affecting children. Instead of just talking about the issue, she built an evidence-based program designed to help kids develop emotional awareness, mindfulness, and mental resilience. And over the years, it reached millions of children across different countries. That kind of work says a lot about a person. Goldie wasn't building something flashy for headlines. She was trying to create practical tools that could genuinely help young people handle emotional pressure better. A lot of that motivation came from her own life experience and the emotional lessons she learned over time. She saw something worrying happening in the world and decided simply noticing it wasn't enough. That takes real character. And honestly, that type of character doesn't always get huge media attention. It's quieter than celebrity gossip or red carpet photos. But when people eventually look back on someone's life, those actions usually end up meaning far more than temporary Hollywood buzz ever could. Then came the 2025 Oscars. What happened that night caught a lot of people off guard because it felt so unexpectedly honest. Goldie walked onto the stage as a presenter, looking calm, elegant, and completely comfortable in the spotlight after spending more than 50 years in Hollywood. At that point, huge rooms and giant audiences clearly didn't intimidate her anymore. But during the presentation, she suddenly revealed something deeply personal. "I'm completely blind. I am." The audience laughed at first because Goldie delivered the line with perfect comedic timing, the way experienced entertainers do. But underneath the laughter, people also recognized the seriousness behind what she was saying. The moment hit hard because it wasn't polished or over-explained. It was just honest, and in a world where celebrities often carefully manage every public detail, that level of openness caught people's attention instantly. Goldie Hawn later revealed that she had been dealing with cataracts, a condition affecting her vision. And the way she talked about it surprised a lot of people. This was the same woman who had spent decades reading scripts, studying expressions, raising children, and sharing a life with Kurt Russell for over 40 years. Her eyesight had been part of everything she experienced, both personally and professionally, so admitting publicly that her vision had become seriously compromised was a deeply vulnerable moment. And she didn't try to hide it. She said it openly, in front of one of the biggest television audiences of the entire year, without dressing it up or pretending everything was fine. In Hollywood, that kind of honesty stands out immediately, especially for women aging in the public eye. The entertainment industry has always put enormous pressure on celebrities to appear flawless, youthful, and untouched by time. Physical struggles, especially involving aging, are often treated like something to quietly conceal. So, for Goldie to simply say, "I am dealing with this," carried more weight than people realized. That level of openness takes confidence. And honestly, it reflected something she had already been showing for years, a willingness to face reality directly, instead of performing perfection for the public. The changes happening in Goldie and Kurt's lives didn't appear suddenly. They arrived gradually, the same way time catches up with everybody eventually, no matter how famous or successful they are.
That was our first date.
Wow. It kind of makes the rest of us look bad.
It was a lot of fun. I'll tell you what. I can't believe it was a long time ago like that.
Kurt, now in his 70s, has had to deal with the natural physical wear that comes with getting older after a lifetime spent working in demanding environments. Goldie has had to adjust to vision challenges and the vulnerability that naturally comes with losing some independence. Even the way they live changed after the frightening break-ins. Security became part of daily life. Guards became necessary. Los Angeles, the city where they built careers and memories for decades, no longer felt carefree or completely safe anymore. But through all those changes, one thing stayed consistent. The connection Kate Hudson described years earlier still remained visible. He just loves her so much. What makes that quote powerful is the tense of it. Not loved, not used to love. Present tense, ongoing, active. The kind of love that keeps showing up over time in ordinary moments. Kate recognized it not because somebody explained it to her, but because she watched it happen naturally throughout her entire life. The way Kurt looked at Goldie, the way he treated her. The comfort, attention, and affection that stayed visible even after decades together. That kind of bond is hard to fake for 43 years. And honestly, it means more than any wedding ring ever could. A ring is a promise made at the beginning before life fully tests people. What Kate witnessed was something built slowly through years of actual evidence, years of loyalty, years of choosing each other repeatedly, years of surviving difficult moments without walking away. Kurt looking at Goldie like she was still one of the most important parts of his world didn't happen automatically. It happened because both of them understood exactly what heartbreak looked like already. They had seen relationships fail before. They knew how fragile love could become when people stopped paying attention to it. So instead, they kept building something stronger year after year. And underneath their entire story sits one big question people never fully understood while obsessing over marriage rumors for decades. The real mystery surrounding Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell was never about why they didn't get married. They already answered that question many times over the years. Both of them explained their reasons openly and consistently. They weren't confused about their choice, and they never acted ashamed of it either. The deeper question is something else entirely. What does it say about their relationship that, in a world waiting nearly 50 years for them to either finally marry or completely fall apart, neither thing ever happened. That's the part people didn't know how to process. Because somehow, the relationship everyone kept doubting quietly became one of the longest-lasting partnerships in Hollywood, without the traditional blueprint, without the public ceremony, without the legal structure people insisted was necessary. And yet it endured through everything life threw at them. They raised 4 children who grew into adults still speaking warmly about their family instead of describing years of chaos and resentment. They survived painful break-ins, health struggles, career pressures, aging, and all the exhausting ordinary realities that slowly test relationships over time. And according to the people closest to them, love still sits at the center of it all. That changes the entire conversation. For decades, many people expected there had to be some hidden problem behind their refusal to marry, some awful secret, some commitment issue waiting to be exposed eventually, but it never appeared. Instead, what people found was something much simpler and honestly much stronger. 2 people choosing each other every single day without feeling forced to. That's what 43 years without a wedding ceremony actually produced. A family that genuinely worked, not perfect, not fantasy-level flawless, just stable, loving, and real in a way that many celebrity relationships never managed to become. Their children talk about their upbringing with comfort and affection, not like people carefully trying to avoid old wounds. That says a lot. Goldie and Kurt also built their relationship with an unusual structure that many outsiders didn't fully understand. Separate personal spaces, freedom, independence, room to breathe while still staying deeply connected. They understood that closeness doesn't have to mean ownership, and somehow that mindset helped carry them through decades of pressure, public scrutiny, fear, health issues, and all the slow changes life inevitably brings. Their relationship held together not because a contract trapped them there, it held because they genuinely wanted to stay. That's a huge difference. Both of them had already experienced relationships failing before they found each other. They knew what it looked like when love turns into obligation, resentment, or emotional exhaustion. So, together they built something based less on pressure and more on compatibility, honesty, communication, and daily choice. Goldie Hawn summed it up perfectly years ago. A lasting relationship isn't about marriage. It's about compatibility and communication. And when she said that, it didn't sound like somebody trying to promote a trendy relationship philosophy. It sounded like a woman speaking from real experience after already living through the alternative. Because by that point, she wasn't guessing anymore. She already knew what actually holds people together, and what only looks strong from the outside. Kurt Russell explained their relationship in the simplest way possible, the kind of honesty that only hits harder with time. We hit it off and agreed, let's have fun until we don't. And somehow, that turned into 43 years together. No dramatic speeches, no over-the-top Hollywood fairy tale, just a calm statement from a man who never needed extra words to explain something real. And maybe that's exactly why it lasted, because what they built was never about performing love for the public. It was about living it privately, day after day, year after year. That's the part people kept missing. The so-called secret behind Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell's relationship was never scandalous at all. In fact, it was sitting right in front of everybody the entire time. A man who clearly adores his partner, a woman who feels loved without feeling trapped. Children who grew up watching affection, loyalty, honesty, and respect modeled naturally inside their home instead of forced through obligation. And somehow, in an industry famous for tearing relationships apart, theirs survived nearly everything. Not because it followed traditional rules, because it followed what actually worked for them. That's what makes their story stand out after all these decades. They didn't build their life around outside expectations. They built it around trust, freedom, communication, and the decision to keep showing up for each other long after the excitement faded. So, in the end, maybe the public spent 43 years asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, when will they finally get married? Maybe the real question should have been, what does commitment actually look like when nobody is forcing you to stay? Because Goldie and Kurt answered that question without speeches, without grand performances, and without needing public approval. They answered it through decades of real life together, and honestly, it looked exactly like this. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe a relationship without marriage can be just as strong, lasting, and meaningful as one with a wedding ring? Or do you think marriage changes everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is bigger than Hollywood. And if this story meant something to you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with somebody who would appreciate hearing it too. Your support really helps the channel grow.